While you were sleeping, the Texas Senate passed a bill that would pump more money into public schools. But senators tacked on a controversial voucher measure that would redirect state money to help students with special needs pay for private school tuition. The bill's sponsor defended the addition, saying he did not understand why a small program that would affect about 5,000 students would stop lawmakers from approving $500 million for public schools.
All these things we're adding in this bill, but we had one little thing on the end of it called ESA, and the whole world was coming to an end over that little bitty thing.
The bill now heads back to the House, where it will hit a major roadblock. And here to discuss the roadblocks, world coming to an end, as Senator Taylor just mentioned, Monty Exter with the Association of Texas Professional Educators, and Emily Sass, a policy analyst with the Texas Public Policy Foundation's Center for Education Freedom. Thank you to both of you for being here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
The big question is, because of the changes the Senate made, I mean, where does this legislation go? We were even hearing from the House Public Ed Chairman Dan Huberty that, this could just be kind of dead on arrival, or both of the measures not going anywhere. What's your take on this?
I would agree with Chairman Taylor that I kind of have trouble imagining any legislator who would want to vote against an additional $500 million of funding for public schools, as well as giving families with special needs students more often. This is a very limited type program that's intended to help our most vulnerable student population, our special needs students. So to me, it seems like a win-win for everybody. So I'm optimistic.
Win-win for everybody. I know you'll be a little bit on the opposite side of this.
Well, I would say that most of the House members would consider this bill at this point a lose-lose, in addition to the fact that they have added a voucher in on the Senate side, which the House has already voted against multiple times this session. They also stripped about $1 billion of the funding that the House proposed out of the bill, in addition to stripping many of the other provisions that were important to the lower chamber.
If this is, Monty, I'll pose this to you, but if this is, kind of the exchange for one for the other type of thing, why not go with the $500 million that is being offered up?
Well, again, I think that the House has some genuine concerns about the way that the bill has been presented, even outside of the voucher from the Senate. But the voucher itself has the ability over time to grow to strip far more money out of the system than what the $500 million that they're proposing to put in would actually place into the system. I know that Chairman Taylor said over and over again, oh, this tiny little thing, this 5,000 kids, but those numbers aren't actually based on anything. There are other states who have far larger usage rates than the one that he cited, and we're looking at this as possibly taking hundreds of millions to sometimes billions of dollars out of the education system around the state.
Big complaint is, taking public money and using it for private schools. What's your response to what Monty's saying, but also just in terms of the House being very reluctant to do this?
So I'd like to differ with your assessment a little bit, Monty, in a very respectful way. Historically, these school choice programs across the country have resulted in savings to the state. And we fully expect that that would be the case here in Texas. It's done that in other places. You were mentioning the uptake rate. In Arizona, the 22% of the Arizona school-age population is eligible for a similar ESA program. 1% participate in that program, and that's been the case. It's taken them 6 years now to get to that 1% figure. So the idea that this is going to balloon, I think, is overstated. I think this is an opportunity to provide children who could really use some alternatives. With those options, save money for the state, and even the schools wind up in a better situation than they did before. They have more money per child than they did when the students were in their district. So again, I see it as a win-win for everybody.
What about the argument of just expansion, starting small but then continuing to expand this in years to come?
I wouldn't be terribly concerned about that. Even in other states that have larger programs than what we're discussing here, we're seeing that across the country, again, the participation rate tends to be about 1% to 2%. I think we can all agree that most people are very happy with their neighborhood public schools. Most people have no reason to leave. Their schools are working great for them. Why would they leave? There are just some cases where the local neighborhood school where a child is supposed to go isn't the best environment for them. And we see that most clearly in situations where children have special educational needs. And we think that it's simply fair for those children to have additional options.
Monty, I'll let you respond to that, but also just, and I think, you know, for both of you, we've heard about the accountability measures or the lack of accountability measures in some of these options, as well as just access in terms of who all would be able to access these programs.
Right. So I think that, first of all, it's very important that both legislators and your viewers understand that a savings to the state and a cost to the district are not mutually exclusive. Just because the state saves money doesn't mean that individual school districts don't lose money, which they do under this plan. In addition to that, I think that you bring up some really valid points when you talk about accountability, particularly when you're talking about the special education population, because then you're not only talking about standard school accountability, but you're also talking about the loss of federal rights under the IDEA program that have been hard fought by this population over many years.
You know, we're running out of time, and if none of these pass this session, what happens next?
We keep advocating for the best educational options for children in these vulnerable communities.
Monty?
Frankly, we do the same. We simply feel that the best option for these particular students, when you're talking about special education students, is increasing the funding for those particular weights that fund special education, so that districts can offer them more programs than what they're currently getting.
Harmful to not have that 530 million though this time around, and I know that the House had allocated a lot more.
So that 530 million doesn't actually go to raise the basic allotment. It goes to some very specific things. So it's actually not something that would be spread amongst all students.
I think it's fair to point out that, as Chairman Taylor pointed out in his comments last night, 92 to 93% of school districts would gain funds and benefit from the bill in its current form.
We are out of time. We'll have to bring you both back in to talk more about this because it will be a continued issue. Thank you to both of you. Appreciate you being here.